Cool.
What's up, my people? It's Devin here with Make Anything, and today is the day that a lot of you have been waiting for. By far, the biggest request from my subscribers has been an overview of all the 3D pens I've got, or basically people wanting to know, what's the best 3D pen? Makes sense. If you want a 3D pen, you want the best one, of course. I hate to break it to you, but I'm not going to be able to say, here, this is the best 3D pen, because each pen has its own pros and cons, and there are some things that might be more important to you and other things that you're willing to kind of let go. So in this episode, instead of just saying, get this pen, I'm going to go through and try each one out and let you guys know what's good and what's bad about each one. Things like price, quality, the different filaments it can use, you know? And then based on what you care about most, you can decide which pen you want. So I'll go through each of my different categories one at a time with each pen in the order that I first reviewed them. And then at the end we'll kind of look at a compilation. So if all you're interested in are the end results, just skip to the end of the video and you can see my kind of chart laid out of what's good and bad about each pen. If you want to see them in action, well, just keep watching. Let's do it! So first up is the 3Doodler Create. This is one of the first pens I tried, and it's still up there among my favorites. At $100, it sits just about in the middle of the price range for these pens, and it's also one of the more compact pens you can get, so it's nice if you're doing long doodle sessions. This pen can use PLA, ABS, or flexible material, and it offers 2 speeds. Here's the filament that we use with the 3Doodler Create, and unlike a lot of the pens that come on coils, these are in rods. So the rods can be good because they're a lot easier to deal with. You just stick it in the back of the pen and it's not dangling all around while you're trying to draw. You can buy a lot of extra accessories for the 3Doodler, like this drawing mat. They also have a power bank so that you can take it on the go, as well as this nozzle set, which comes with a bunch of different size and shaped nozzles that you can swap out on the 3Doodler, which I haven't tried yet, but seems like it could be really cool. So to compare my pens, we're first going to draw a line on the slowest setting, and then on the fastest setting. So here you can see what the slow looks like. And here's a line using the fast speed. Next we're going to draw a cube, which is good at testing how well the pen actually draws vertically, as well as in the air. By the way, for this demonstration I'm using PLA plastic for all the pens that I have PLA plastic for to try to be more consistent. So you can see how long I have to hold it up there for it to cool down, and that's based on the temperature as well as on the plastic. ABS would actually cool a little quicker, but I still prefer PLA because it stinks a lot less and it's pretty good for most things. So don't judge the pen entirely on my ability to bridge, but you can see that it does a pretty good job as long as you get the right speed. Now if this pen does get clogged, there's a little window back here at the front that you can open up, and that'll give you access to the filament near the hot end. You also might have to remove the nozzle using this little tool that comes with it so that you can push the filament out if it gets stuck inside of the pen, which I've had to do a few times. So that can be kind of a hassle, especially since you don't want to just have this hot end fall onto your table and melt a hole in it. So you might want to use a ceramic plate or something to put it on. A lot of you wanted to know if you could use third-party filament with this 3Doodler, since it comes with these strands that are relatively expensive compared to like a spool of 3D printing filament. And while my printer uses 1.75mm filament, this 3Doodler has 3mm rods. But for you guys, I ended up buying this 3mm spool of ABS just so I could test this out and see if it'll work. So obviously this comes on a spool and the 3Doodler takes straight rods, so whether or not this will end up jamming it is something we've got to find out. I'm definitely not going to use this super messed up bit at the beginning. Let's just go ahead and try cutting off a piece like that and seeing if that'll work.
So the reason I cut off a section instead of just trying to feed the whole coil through is that the 3-doodler actually rotates the filament as it's feeding through the pen. So by doing a section like this, hopefully it will still work out. You can see exactly what I'm talking about right here as it spins around. And here I am drawing a cube with that filament, so it totally seems to be working. Of course I'll want to test this out a bit more, but for now I'm going to say that yes, you can use 3mm 3D printing filament in the 3-doodler Create, as long as you cut it into rods, and you might have to be ready for it to clog a little more often since it's not a straight rod. Next up, we've got the latest version of the Scribbler pen, and this one costs the same amount at $100, so it's a really close competitor to the 3-doodler Create. And while this pen looks a little bulkier, it also has a lot of additional features. You can choose between 6 speeds instead of just 2, and you can also adjust the temperature yourself, which could be helpful if you're trying to get the parts to cool quicker. You can buy a ton of different types of filament on the Scribbler website, from flexible, wood, PLA, ABS, metal, glow-in-the-dark, or you can use any 1.75mm 3D printing filament as well. I have to apologize here because I actually gave away the power supply for my Scribbler when I had my last 3D pen giveaway, and I thought I could use the power supply from my 3-doodler Create with the Scribbler since the connections fit together, but the pen wasn't able to get up to temperature and it gave me an error. So I actually can't perform the tests with my Scribbler today, but you can check out my original review and see everything about the pen there as well. Next up is the KreoPop, and that's a $130 pen, which is very different from the rest because it uses an ink that is UV cured instead of a filament. But it's still a 3D pen, so I thought I would include it in this review. So there's the cartridge in the back, and this pen actually has a built-in battery, so you can charge it and then use it wirelessly, which is super cool.
As a lot of you mentioned in the last review, this UV light that comes out here is pretty bad for your eyes. So it might be wise to pick up some of these UV protecting glasses. I mean, they're pretty stylish anyways.
So here you can see the KreoPop drawing at the slowest of its 5 speed settings. As you can see, it's pretty slow, and that's so that the ink has enough exposure to that little UV light so that it actually cures and hardens while you're drawing. Here you can see it in the fast speed, but in this case it won't actually cure that fast, so you would have to go over it again with the light to harden it. So here I'm using the fast setting, and you can see that after the line is done, the ink isn't completely hardened yet. So I just have to double click up there and turn on the light, and that'll allow it to fully cure. The rest of the cube I did at the slower speed, and you can see that works better for actually having it harden while you're drawing. And while it's pretty slow, you can really draw sideways in the air, which is something you can't quite do with the other pens. Next up is the SevenTech pen, which is $70, and it's basically a copy of the Scribbler version 2. SevenTech doesn't actually sell filament for its pen, so you can use just about any 1.75mm filament as long as it's decent quality filament. Now, this pen has some weird quirks. For example, look at how slow it can draw. Why would you ever need to go this slow? It's insane. But luckily the speed is controlled by a slider, so you can still get a pretty slow line by just speeding it up a little bit. And here it is on the fast setting, which you can see is ridiculously fast as well. So I'll set that speed somewhere in the middle and draw this cube again. Still pretty fast. My biggest complaint about this pen, just like the Scribbler, is that they don't have retraction, so it can end up being a little stringier than some of the other pens. Here's the 3Doodler Start. It's a $50 pen, which makes it the cheapest on my list today. And this is a great pen if you just want something simple and straightforward. It only has one speed, one temperature, and one type of plastic, so it's very hard to go wrong with the 3Doodler Start. So here you can see what that one speed looks like. So this special formula of plastic made for the 3Doodler Start comes out really smooth and nicely. It also takes longer to cool, so you can kind of move it around after you've drawn with it. But that also means it takes a lot longer to cool down, as you can see with this vertical strut I'm trying to create. Here I am bridging the top part of the pen, and it was working really well, although I kind of messed up in the end. But because the plastic cools so slowly, I was actually able to just grab that string and put it back into place, and it worked out. So it is kind of a different experience, but I like it. Next up is the Dewang X4 pen. It's a little more expensive than the Start, and it's actually very similar. It also uses a special low temperature plastic called PCL. Unlike the 3Doodler Start, it actually has 3 speeds, each with its own temperature. So here's the slow speed. And the fast. As with the SevenTech, I don't think Dewang sells their own filament just yet, but I was able to find another brand of PCL filament that seems like it would work with this pen, and I'll have that in the description. As with the Start, you can see this one also takes a pretty long time to harden, those vertical lines. And the plastic itself is kind of droopy, but because it's low temperature, it's pretty great for drawing on electronics and things like that. Next up is the Lix, and this is the most expensive pen on my list at $150, and with that price comes a very nice looking pen. So this is the smallest 3D pen you can get, and it's pretty comfortable in the hand, although it does get a little warm. This pen has 2 temperatures, one for PLA, one for ABS, as well as 2 speeds. Although as you'll see here, the 2 speeds look pretty similar to me. Yeah, pretty much the same, right? Now, while the Lix can use PLA, I didn't have any of their PLA filament, so unlike the other pens, I am using ABS here. And as you can see, it worked super nicely. This is one of the cleanest cubes I made. You guys also wanted to know if you could use other filament with this pen, and so I tried the Scribbler filament in here, which ended up clogging the pen. So while you might be able to get it to work, I don't think it's worth the hassle. It was really hard to get the filament out afterwards as well. Pretty frustrating. I'm gonna say you don't want to use third-party filament with the Lix pen. Finally, we've got the 3D Simo Mini at $130. This is the last pen I tested, and like I say in my review, it's a lot more than just a 3D pen because it has soldering, wood burning, and other attachments, as you can see here, but today we're just gonna judge it as a 3D pen. If you want to control speed and other settings, you're going to have to download the smartphone app for the 3D Simo Mini, and you can actually use that app to control different settings of the pen. Here it is printing at slow speed. And at the faster speed. Not much to complain about here. It works pretty much like a standard 3D pen. Alright, Alright guys, there it is, the 8 pens that I've tested so far, and I've created this handy chart that has a comparison of a bunch of different features. I'll have a link to this image in the description, but we'll quickly look over the features right now. When it comes to price, the 3Doodler Start is the lowest cost, and 3Doodler and 3D Simo are about tied for having the lowest filament price. Although, the ability to use a non-brand filament means that price can be a lot lower if you use 3D printer filament. If having a lot of control over the speed is important to you, you might want to check out the Scribbler, the KreoPop, or the SevenTech. Most pens have automatic temperature control based on the filament and speed you're using. Next to that, I looked at whether or not the pens have retraction. Retraction means after you draw a line, the plastic is pulled back into the pen just a tiny bit, and that helps create cleaner lines with less stringiness. The KreoPop and the 3Doodler Start are the only pens with a built-in battery. However, the Create and 3D Simo Mini have additional power banks that you can connect, and actually any of the pens that are charged via USB can be made portable just by connecting them to an external battery pack for a cell phone, for example. I also looked at if the hot end could be replaced, so if you get a clog, you'll be able to swap out the front part of the pen instead of having to get an entirely new pen. So that's something you can do with the Create, the Scribbler, SevenTech pen, and the Dewang. And in the final column, you can see the different materials that are supported by all the different pens. If you want to try out a lot of crazy different materials, then I think the Scribbler and the 3D Simo Mini are your best bets.
Alright guys, well that's it for this one. I hope it was helpful. I know there's a lot of information here, there's a lot of different pens, and as I've always said, they're pretty similar in the end, so whichever one you end up getting, you're bound to have some fun. Hope you liked it. Until next time, I'm Devin, this is Make Anything. Stay inspired.